Howdy. Today is 9/9/22 and I am just north of Morro Bay in the central California coast, approximately 40 miles south of the Jade node in Big Sur. Today also is the day that I believe Mercury goes retrograde, and tomorrow is the full moon. And I'm here basically to do these measurements to the Emperor Dragon subtle energy field of this area, primarily because I have a theory that I need to either dispel or approve that there's a connection between the full moon and the expansion of the subtle energy field of the planet. And so today I established where the southern edge of the Emperor Dragon line is, and confirmed that it's not just the edge of the line, but the edge of the node in Jade Cove, both of which are 46 miles south now. The edge is 46 miles south, and I confirmed where that is. It's just south of San Luis Obispo, as I kind of predicted that it would be. And I believe the northern edge of this 136 mile swath of Emperor Dragon energy is most likely going to be found near Pescadero Beach, north of Santa Cruz. I'll confirm that within the next day or so. And then I'll start watching. The reason I'm doing this is because in June, when the Emperor Dragons were only 4 miles wide, instead of what they are now, 92 miles wide, they started expanding the second morning after the full moon itself. In astrology, we say that a full moon is actually the full moon phase is like a 3-day period. So it kind of makes sense that it would start. There's a reason why it might have started the day after the full moon stopped being full. So we'll see. We'll see if that pattern holds, and if it does, then that proves that there's this connection between the lunar phase and the expansion itself, and what's causing this oscillation and these subtle energy sound structures emanating from the core of the planet. So if all of this sounds like gobbledygook to you, I recommend that you kind of go back through my feed and look at some of my previous posts, especially the ones titled Cosmic Weather. So there's no way right now to tell if the expansion, if it's even going to start in, if it's going to expand at all any more than it already has. And if it does, how much is it going to expand this time? Is it going to stop expanding? Last time it expanded from as I said, the full moon was the 14th of June. It started expanding again on the 16th of June, and it continued until the 8th of July. which the significance of the 8th of July is the harmony period where all the ley lines on the planet vibrate at the same frequency, ended on July 8th. And as on June 16th, I was able, between the 16th and the 17th, I was able to establish that the lines were going to expand at a rate of 4 miles a day, which they did. And that made it possible for me to actually predict that they would be 92 miles wide on July 8th when they stopped. And that on June 28th, the emperor dragons that are, one that comes out of the ocean at Jade Cove, and the other one, the northern one, that comes out of the ocean at Monterey Bay, and they both go across the country to Virginia, that they would expand at a rate of 4 miles a day. And I was able to measure them every day up through the solstice of June, the 21st, and at which point they were, I believe, 24 miles wide. And on the 28th, they actually overlapped one another. The center line of the southerly emperor dragon line overlapped the center line of the northerly one as well. And thus, at this point, they've created what I call a swath, 136-mile wide swath that goes coast to coast across North America. And this is a lot easier to understand when you realize that these what we're calling lines are actually sound structures emanating from the core of the planet. But what I've obviously been very meditating on what the significance of all this is, as I made my way across the country in July, I measured this swath as it crossed in the area of where it crossed the Mississippi River, and established that it was indeed 136 miles wide. And then there's another emperor dragon line. If you haven't been paying any attention, there's another emperor dragon line that is crossing the one that goes east and west. There's one that goes north and south around from pole to pole, and it crosses this one that goes east and west, also in Virginia. And I crossed it between West Virginia and Maryland and Pennsylvania, and confirmed that it also had expanded to create a 136-mile wide swath going north and south around the planet. And then I went to Cape Cod, where I'm from, and I mapped out the solar lines that make up the grid there. And I've posted maps and whatnot. You can go back through my Instagram feed and check out the maps that I made, and found out some really amazing correlations. Like, for instance, the presence, I should say, of ancient, in some cases 10,000-year-old burial grounds along some of the most powerful lines in the region, and also in the node itself that kind of commands that whole area. There's a place where 4 major solar lines cross, and at the Royal, what's called the Royal Wampanoag Cemetery. I visited the cemetery and followed one of the lines from there to Cape Cod, towards south towards Buzzards Bay, and along the way, within five miles, I found there were a string of 5 or 6 other pretty old cemeteries, at least dating back to colonial times, and some of which are actually older than the country, older than the U.S., but predating the Revolution. So there can be no small. This can't be any small coincidence. And what's also interesting is it's not just the Native Americans that buried their dead in these subtle energy lines, but the early colonists did as well. And I have to say, the anecdotal information about these nodes, where ley lines cross, is that there's some sort of interdimensional portal that's created where they cross, and that's somehow accentuated at the solstices and equinoxes, most likely during the harmony periods. And given that up until 10 years ago, approximately, the harmony period was just one day, but as of June, the harmony period has steadily expanded since 10 years ago, since about 2010, 12 years ago, I guess, to now it's 18 days long, and that's it expanded 3 days since March. So there's a possibility it could expand again, starting in a couple of days. So, just kind of jumping around here, trying to cover a lot of this information. The past couple of days, though, especially last night, I was parked down, spent the night down by Santa Barbara, just west of Santa Barbara, on a south-facing coast that is very similar to where I'm from, in that it's south-facing, and when you look out, you're seeing several islands offshore. And I've kind of made it a point of, when I park for the night, to do a quick check and see if I'm anywhere near any ley lines. And once again, I found myself parked in a ley line of some kind. I didn't, find the edges and everything, but I know it's a solar line. I don't know how much, how big it is or anything, but which brings me to when I was coming back across the country from the East Coast. I was kind of like in a time crunch to get there before the end of the month, the end of August, because I needed to re-register my car, and in California you have to have a smog certificate, pass emissions inspection in order to before you can even apply for your registration. And the van has it doesn't owe me anything. It's got over 400,000 miles on it, of which I probably put about 40,000 of that on it in the past 2 years, and it has some problems, and I wasn't sure right up until when I took it to in fact, the morning that I took it to the emissions place. I was going there specifically to get a failed ticket so that would at least give me another month to work, work out the bugs to get it to pass. But it passed miraculously. I think there was some angel magic in that. No one was more stunned by the experience than I. But on the way back cross country, I mostly followed 70 up until till Denver, and so that meant, from like the middle of Ohio to Colorado. I was traveling the 70, and once again, I checked the lines. I checked where I was at night when I stopped to see if there were any, if I was in a node or in the energy, basically. And every night I seemed to be in it, and as it turned out, I was literally crossing through the Emperor Dragon that goes the swath, the 136-mile swath, for most of the journey across, from like the Mississippi, from Illinois, through Kansas and Colorado, and then at Denver I dropped south to Taos, spent the night outside Taos, and then drove over to Flagstaff in that area, and Williams, and eventually, when I checked, I was still in the line. I was still in the Emperor Dragon. So I spent 3 nights in the Emperor Dragon going cross country, and then there's a place on the PCH between Pacific Palisades and Malibu, which is right just like a couple hundred yards north of the Getty Villa. And that's where I often, when I have to go to LA to the doctors or whatever, spend the night to go to the hospital the next day or whatever, I spend the night on the side of the road there. It's one of my favorite places because on one side you have the ocean, the waves coming in, and that music, and on the other side you have the highway, and there are times when it just sounds like a symphony. It's so beautiful, and I've recorded it several times. But so out of the blue, out of my little habit of checking the energy, I checked the energy, and sure enough, I found out that I was parked in a line. I was parked in the energy. Which is kind of following a trend of discovering that so many of the places that I've been drawn to my whole life are places where the energy is, and without even knowing it. This place on just in my hometown, there's an obstacle point where we scatter my mother's ashes, where the lighthouse is. It appears to be a node, a major solar node. And Falmouth Heights. Don't know if it's there is a node there, but it's a node that is most likely made of a combination of earth energy lines. That's lines that are generated by the earth itself. The rotation of the Earth's core around its outer core, creating these low frequency sound waves that radiate to the surface, as this whole matrix of subtle energy lines that are what I say called ubiquitous, because they're everywhere. If you pick up a stone, I've said this before, you'll hear me say it again. If you throw a stone, you're probably more likely than not to hit or have it land in the presence of a earth generated subtle energy line. The solar lines are more powerful and less prevalent, and there's 3 orders of those. The ones that up until 2017 were 10 paces wide, 20 paces wide, and 30 paces wide, which at this moment appear to be 100, 200, and 300 paces wide. The most powerful ones being the 300 paces wide, and those are the ones that I was mapping out when I was doing that survey of Cape Cod. And so Nobska Point in Falmouth is a place where there's solar lines, the most powerful 300 pace wide lines crossing, and Falmouth Heights, where I and my family lived for a time back in the 80s. We literally lived maybe less than 100 yards from what appears to be a node created by a 200 pace wide solar line and something like a 20 pace wide earth energy line. So I have been saying all that to say I've been gravitating to these places. Oh yeah, the last one I want to do a little quick energy shout out to is this, what is to me an anchor point, which is what I've identified as a node at South Point Katama on the far side, the south side of the island of Martha's Vineyard, that I've felt a tremendous need to make pilgrimage to every time I go to the island. And I discovered that there's at least 3 solar generated lines and 1 earth generated line that node there. So there's that going on. And then I guess what I'm saying is I sense that this is a moment of both of discovery, both for me personally and with regards to the whole system. Me personally, because of discovering these connections that I've unconscious connections I've had with the grid system, the satellite energy system, and now is the time of the big reveal, right? And just by weird coincidence, at the moment that it's all expanding, and I want to talk about something that came to me last night, and that is the number 4 in this story. The fact that the first expansion of the ley lines of the emperor dragons that was beyond the paces, hundreds of paces, was when in March, when the emperor dragons reached a width of 4 miles. And then in June, they started to expand at a rate of 4 miles a day. And last night, it just kind of dawned on me that it's pretty weird that we have this designation of miles, and it lands right at 4, right? Which kind of makes me want to get back into what is the basis of the mile. And I've I've forgotten a lot over the years. I've known, these correlations and stuff, and you know, my geekdom has its limits, and I do forget. But I do remember that there is something to do with the basic measurement of the planet and the moon as well, that has to do with the width of a mile, or the establishment of the width of the mile. And I'm going to dive into that in the coming days more deeply. But I'm just pointing it out that it's very odd that the expansion should happen at an even number, like 4, and not just once, but like I said, in March, the first time it expanded beyond, a couple hundred paces, it landed at 4, and it stayed 4 miles apart until June, so for 3 months. And I know this because I measured it 4 times during those 3 months. And then it expands again, but at a rate that is 4 miles a day. It'll be very interesting to see what the rate is now. If it's a multiple of 4, or its relationship to 4 has any. Maybe it'll be a whole nother number. It'd be interesting if it was an odd number for a change, And then another thing that's kind of another thing on my mind about all of this is the possibility. You may have heard me mention before that I recognize myself as somewhat of a freak. In a lot of ways, but the most exposed person in the Western Hemisphere, because I've been traveling around to all of these places in the modern fashion, with my blue steed here, and exposing myself to all these nodes and lines and whatnot in a way that would have been impossible 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago in one person's lifetime. And because there's only a handful of people that even know about this subtle energy system, never mind, having a pretty clear idea of how of what it looks like on a map, and having directly experienced it in a way that is fully conscious, where I know where I am in the grid. I know what my relationship is to it, to a large degree, and I'm just basically consciously aware that there is such a thing, and that I'm relating to it, right? It's possible. When you're doing this kind of work, you have to pay attention to subtle energy, right? You have to pay attention to your intuition and all the inklings that come, tapping on the periphery of your awareness. And so one of the possibilities that's been occurring to me, it started to happen when I was on the Cape. I started to get some very, and this is after, connecting with all of these different nodes and lines on the Cape. For the whole month I was there, I was undergoing, engaging in this survey of Cape Cod. And I didn't go there with that intention. It just, I was kind of led to it. And I started to wonder if I was triggering the reaction of the dowsing rods. By holding the frequency of the energy, or being able to invoke or generate or transmit the energy. And was my traveling activating the system? And I don't have a complete answer to that question right now, but what I do have from Rory's research, we do have an effect on the system. The lines are attracted to people. One of the things that he found, and I can corroborate, is that they are often found near playgrounds, and schools and churches, and so it's possible that we can affect the system, and as well as being affected by it. And I know there are times when Rory's was actually involved in a project to move, quote unquote, repair a node in Europe that is has to do with the Emperor Dragon. He and two other people were responsible for moving an Emperor Dragon line, and so it's possible that all these exposures have resulted in me personally carrying a charge. And here's another thing that may add to that is a little odd, because makes me a bit more unique than most people, and that is the fact that I after about 2 months after I dowsed for the first time, and the first thing I dowsed was the snowed up in Big Sur, I began chemo and radiation treatment. And the chemo that I had is a platinum-based drug. So I received approximately 400 milligrams in 2 infusions over 6 weeks, and of this platinum-based drug. And during that time, I received 2,600 units of radiation. So the infusions spread that platinum to every cell of my body, and then every cell of my body experienced this radiation. And so the platinum is irradiated. So I like to joke that I'm Platinum Man because it was one of those things that I would kind of just play around with it in my mind while I was undergoing these cancer treatments, to amuse myself. But the idea was that looking at the cancer treatments as kind of like the hero's journey, the moment when the ordinary human being is exposed to some kind of extraordinary something or other, and they, in the course of that exposure, they discover their superpowers. Right? That was my my little mental bubblegum game I was playing with myself. And but that said, It's is it possible that this made me that much more sensitive to subtle energy? I can't. I'll never know because this is where we're at. Have I been going through uh, some sort of acceleration, energetic acceleration? Heck yeah. And so has everybody else, especially through COVID. I just, I started those treatments the week before COVID started. And I've been, every 3 months I've been doing these measurements and exposures to the nodes in California, the Emperor Dragon nodes in California, and several of the major solar nodes in California. And, becoming ever more conscious and ever more sensitive to subtle energy, energy in general, and thus, at the same time, just tremendously more intuitive than I was before. And I was pretty intuitive before, but now it's that much more powerful, and it's been kind of dedicated to understanding what's going on with the subtle energy field, and doing my best to kind of keep people abreast of what I'm doing here. What's going on. So saying all that to say that it's not that much, it's not that far-fetched to entertain that one's exposure to the energy can result in you being a carrier of the energy, a battery for the energy, and that as a battery you can discharge. There's a thing that's been happening. It started the spring, the first equinox after. So it would have been the equinox of. Oh, no. I was going through the treatment at that point. So it would have been 2020. It was the equinox of 2021 is when it started. I had been in Monterey to do the measurements and everything. And this is before the Emperor Dragon that comes out of the ocean at Monterey at Sunset Point. At that point, I think it was only about between 200 and 400 paces wide. And I'd done the measurements. It was still the harmony period. I was parked on the north shore of the peninsula, which was not in the energy, not in the Emperor Dragon. And I started to experience this vibration that I wasn't sure if it was me or if it was the, coming up through the earth. I didn't know if it was my body or I was detecting it coming from outside of my body. And that was the first time it happened, and it's been happening increasingly ever since. And now it's to a point where it can start in my feet, but it can also I can actually invoke it. I can just drop into an awareness of it, and like right now, I can feel it in my hands, and pretty much at will. And the reason I'm telling you this, the reason I went into this, is because once again, a constant meditation through this whole thing has been to try to answer what the question that everybody seems to, their first question when I tell them anything about this is, what does it mean? What does all this mean? And I've been trying to answer that question, and looking forward, if this expansion continues, it's a very good possibility that by within the next 2 years, the whole planet will be covered in this this energy, the subtle energy that's coming from these 6, what used to be 12 emperor dragons, but are now 6 swaths of, that at this moment are 136 miles wide, going around the planet. And each one of those emperor dragon swaths are caused by this cosmic radiation coming from galaxies, 6 galaxies in our galactic neighborhood. Beams of cosmic radiation interacting with the upper atmosphere create subatomic particles called neutrinos that stream down through the planet, and at the densest part of the planet, at the core, they collide. Enough of them collide to create these low frequency sound waves that radiate to the surface as what up until now were 6 pairs of emperor dragon lines. Now, since June, those two lines, all the 2 lines, the pairs of lines have overlapped one another to create these 136 mile wide serpents or dragons, and that undulate, over a certain period. Most of them, 5 of the 6, undulate at a rate of a vibratory rate of 48 hours, and the 6th one, which is the one that goes across America, east and west, undulates over 72 hours. These emperor dragons will, what they all have in common is that what happens at the core of the planet. So if things continue expanding at the rate they're going, it's possible that there will be 6 layers of emperor dragon energy covering the planet. And when it gets to that point, what has come to me through my meditations on this question, what does it all mean? And, how can we make best use of this? When it gets to that point, what's most likely, what it all means, as I've said before, is whatever we choose to make of it. And I'm not saying that to be flippant. I'm saying that literally. If you choose to ignore this, or poo-poo it and say that it's just another funky new age pile of poop, then that'll be your experience of it. That said, conversely, what I've been experiencing, recognizing this period of my life as, I recognize that I'm on a shamanic journey. My experience with the cancer was merely part of that. My experience of having that crash on Christmas Day and recovering from, having to teach myself how to walk again. 9 months ago? 9 months ago, I didn't know if I'd ever be able to run again, never mind fly again. All all of these things have been, a case of, to me, metaphysician, heal thyself, right? Metaphysics means, meta means beyond, and essentially metaphysics means beyond the physical plane of existence, recognizing that everything beyond the plane of existence is far bigger than what we have going on in the physical, right? And that's our point of origin is there, which is actually right here and right here, right here, right here, right here, right here, right here, right? Because only what is infinite is real. If it isn't infinite, it isn't real, and we all know that this dust is not infinite, right? But our consciousness is what is infinite. And most of us are not here to even ponder these things. Most of us are here to have whatever designed experience we've chosen before we came into this life, right? So I personally have been reveling in the solitude that I found on the road over the past couple of years, staying away from people, COVID and all that kind of stuff, being immune compromised and whatnot. I still wear a mask when I go indoors and all that kind of stuff. But I really have begun to enjoy my own company and have been using the solitude to get whatever the source of the universe wants me to understand, to focus on that, and to be the best version of myself that I can possibly be. And it appears that I signed up to play this role of discoverer. I guess I'm a canary in the coal mine, so I'm a little ahead of all the people like in Monterey or Newport News, Virginia, or now San Luis Obispo is actually in the node, right? All of San Luis Obispo, as I established this morning, is the southern end of the node that is generated in Jade Cove, on the top of the mountain above Jade Cove. The edge of it is just south of San Luis Obispo. The node in Monterey, that's 7 miles from the coast in Monterey, extends north of Santa Cruz, California, and almost to San Jose. And so all those populations have, for the past 3 months, been daily, 24 hours a day, been exposed to the Emperor Dragon energy. And that's only one. That's only one Emperor Dragon pair. What happens when everybody is exposed to 6 of these? Now, I'm going to say this again, and if you've listened to any of my other posts, you'll. I don't want to bore anybody, but I feel like new people are checking into this information, and they kind of need to understand a few things. When populations are exposed to this, let me take a step back. I think everyone can agree that we're on a new page. And nobody knows even what friggin' book we're reading from. It's the going forward from here. When the Emperor Dragons cover the planet, all 6 of them, we will have the energy potential at our disposal to make of it whatever we choose to make of it. And from my personal experience, in terms of growth, spiritual growth, it's the ideal conditions for it. Whatever it is that your soul requires you to know or to explore or whatever, you couldn't ask for a better environment. I guess what really needs to happen here is I should probably share this vision that I had a few years back. Something told me the other day I would have to connect the dots, and I was meditating on what all of this means, and then I remembered the vision. I'm trying to envision a world where there's 6 layers of this Emperor Dragon energy everywhere. Like there is no place that is not covered by it, right? One of the oldest nodes on the planet that is an Emperor Dragon node is on top of Mount, well, not just on top, it is the whole mountain itself at this point, Mount Kailash in the Himalayas. And I've said this before, so I'm sorry for those that have heard it. This mountain is sacred to at least 5 or maybe 6 religions that have grown up in that region, and each for thousands of years, and right at this moment, there are people that have made and are making pilgrimages to that mountain. And this mountain is where 2 emperor dragons cross one another. Emperor dragons don't cross one another very often. And what that used to mean was that you have these 2 parallel lines going around the planet, and they would eventually, in these nodes, they would cross one another while they're crossing another emperor dragon. So you have 4 emperor dragon lines crossing one another, and that's what is on top of was on top of Mount Kailash, but is now, because they were all expanded, the whole mountain is covered in the energy. Our ancestors recognized this energy as so unique that they would make a pilgrimage to this mountain, and when they got there, they would prostrate themselves. That means laying face down, arms, legs, and fingers spread as wide as possible, stand up, take a step, and do the whole thing all over again, all the way around the mountain. That's how sacred our ancestors have held this energy. And that was just 2 emperor dragon pairs crossing. Imagine what happens when 6. Wherever you go, wherever you're standing on the planet, you're experiencing 6 layers of that energy. So I'm meditating on that. What's it going to be like, sometime within the next 2 to 3 years when the whole planet is covered in this energy? And then I remembered the vision that I had. This was 1998. I was staying in a cabin in New Hampshire, painting my brains out and reading 2 books, one by Leonard Orr, the person that started Rebirthing for the New Age, and I started to rebirth myself. And the other is actually 2 books by this woman named Barbara Ann Brennan, and Hands of Light and Light Emerging. And she is a person who used to be a NASA scientist, atmospheric scientist for NASA. and you know, she actually moved on from that and became a clinician. She had a practice where she saw patients, and she, within the first couple of days of opening a practice, she recovered her ability that she had when she was like 4 or 5 years old to see energy, to see auras. And so for the next, I think, 15 years, her practice was working with the human energy field and the universal energy field. And she started a school called the Barbara Ann Brennan School of Healing, and wrote these 2 books about the human energy field and the universal energy field. And in her school, she basically taught people how to see auras and to work with them. And so I had a really amazing time there. And as I'm reading her books, as I finished her books, I am still coming to understand what it was that I had just read, you know, because the information is so applicable, you know, so useful. So I highly recommend it. But as I finished those books and I finished this cycle of meditations that I was doing, having to do, you know, reclaiming my my inner child and reclaiming and reestablishing these energetic bonds with my ancestors on both lineages, my father and my mother. And I dropped into a revelry that lasted for quite a while. I don't know if it was an hour or more, but I just started. I had a vision, and I saw where humanity is going. I saw what our destiny is, in a sense. I saw that humanity, you know, living on this planet, the planet being part of the solar system, and the solar system moving around this orbit, this 24,000-year orbit that brings it closer to the galactic center and then further away, you know, 12,000 years towards the galactic center, 12,000 years away, in this egg-shaped orbit where the sharp end of the egg is at the furthest point from the galactic center, and the fat end of the egg is closest to the galactic center. And the closer the solar system gets to the galactic center, the easier it is for incarnate souls to perceive and manifest divinity. The further away, the more challenging it is for people to experience that. And that we were at the sharp end of the egg, 499 AD. That means the dark age, excuse me, what we call, you know, what scientists call or historians call the dark ages, was when we were literally at the furthest point from the galactic center. So I was aware of that cycle back then, and what I saw, you know, that I know that we are headed back towards the galactic center. We're about 1,500 years moving back towards the galactic center. It will take us another 10,500 years to reach that point of closest proximity to the galactic center. And that I could see that in my lifetime, you know, I'm 65 as of last week. In the 65 years I've been on this planet, the day I was born, there were 2.8 billion souls. Now we're approaching 8 billion. So, you know, over 5 billion more souls in 65 years. Given that we didn't reach 1 billion souls incarnate until around the year 1800, that we know of, at least in the past 10,000 years. And So as we're moving back towards the galactic center, in my lifetime, I've experienced nothing but an acceleration. And everything is speeding up. Everything feels overwhelming, right? This whole story about the orbit, I was first made aware of by reading the preface to a book called The Holy Science by this brother named Sri Yukteswar, who is Paramahansa Yogananda's guru. And Paramahansa Yogananda is the person that brought Kriya Yoga to the West. Sri Yukteswar was a famous Vedic astrologer as well. And in his lifetime, he was considered an incarnation of wisdom. In this preface, he lays out the nature of this orbit, and he also talks about how the information about it got corrupted over the centuries. And he specifically references a time in the orbit that's equal to where we are right now, except we're heading towards the galactic center. And he's talking about a time that was like 5,000 years ago, when on the other side of the sharp end of the egg, approaching the sharp end of the egg, but in the what's called we're in the ascending phase of the orbit right now, heading towards the galactic center. And he's talking about the time when people were in the descending phase, moving away from the galactic center. So as things are accelerating now, 5,000 years ago, they were actually decelerating. In other words, people were getting stupider. It was becoming harder for people to perceive and manifest divinity, as he put it. And he talks about there was this king that actually abdicated to his grandson rather than continue, because he was like, what's the point? Things are just getting... He abdicated and moved his whole retinue up into the Himalayas just to sit in a cave and meditate for the rest of his life, because he felt so at a loss, because things were coming apart, right? And Sri Yukteswar talks about how that was when a lot of the errors in the calculations, especially around determining what the Kali Yugas are, that's the origin of all those miscalculations. So here we are at this point where we're expanding. They were at a point where it was contracting. And what I saw a couple of years ago, when I had this vision, I saw clear as day that the coming generations were going to be so much more sensitive to subtle energy than we are. And in the same way that there are certain things that we today find intolerable, like slavery, whereas in the darkest part of the Dark Age, around 500 AD, it was just common. It was just commonly understood, commonly accepted that it was okay for people to own people, right? There was cannibalism. There's a good possibility there was cannibalism here in Central America. That there were civilizations built on cannibalism, systematic cannibalism, not just symbolic cannibalism, like the Catholic Eucharist, the body of Christ, eating the body of Christ symbolically, right? Drinking the blood of somebody, right? By drinking the wine. I mean, that's just, the symbolism is just, it's very, it's not a mistake. I mean, people really meant it, Um, and it's a sign of a denser time. And what we're doing now is we're in this acceleration phase. We're moving into a less dense reality and physical reality. Because once again, everything I'm talking about, the subtle energy field is it's not non-physical. It's sound. We're talking about sound structures, the effect of sound structures on humanity, not just humanity, but the whole biosphere, right? And remember that this biosphere evolved in the presence of these vibratory frequencies. So it makes sense that subtle shifts in these frequencies are going to have an effect on the biosphere and humanity. So, one of the ways that I look at things is that in the same way that trees process solar radiation into the nutrients that they need and they leave for their environment, humanity's, that's their job, is to process those frequencies of radiation from our star, right? Humanity has we process different frequencies, right? That's our job, is to process those subtler frequencies. And it makes sense that we would be, as opposed to a tree which is rooted in one spot, we have these legs and limbs and whatnot, and we can move around, and we have brains, we can figure out how to move around faster, and we can even fly and whatnot, and evolve consciously. We can choose to evolve consciously, or choose not to. Either before we come into this life, or while we're here. We can change it any way we want, because we're infinite and immortal beings, right? So I saw this vision that the coming generations would be so much more sensitive to subtle energy, that our way of life today would be intolerable to them. Specifically, because their sensitivity would be all about vibration, and that everything in the physical realm is vibration. That we would, what we take for granted right now, like these engines. People would not be able to. Our engines, most of these engines are basically controlled explosions, right? We've mastered fire to the point where we can create a series of explosions that will get us from Boise to Boston, right, in X amount of hours, and that's pretty amazing, but it's only the beginning, because we just figured this stuff out within the past 100 years, within the past century and a half at the most. Yet those explosions are, they create a disturbance in the ambient field that will eventually become intolerable to us. Light and sound will become more important to us, and keeping our environment clear of disruptions that can disturb our direct experience of the energy, will become a priority that our whole culture, our whole civilization will be based on subtle energy, an understanding of a functional understanding of subtle energy, not a superstitious understanding of it, but a practical understanding of it, to the point of being able to engineer our reality, both individually and as a collective. That's what I saw. And that was 1998. And shortly after that, I was thinking it would be, maybe a couple hundred years, a couple centuries away. But then I started to realize that the children being born now are so much more sensitive to this energy than, and they take it for granted. They take it as a given, and as well they should. As the Earth moves into these regions of space, as the solar system moves into these regions of space that expose us to the energy potential of realizing subtle energy on a more practical daily basis, it only makes sense that we would, begin to take these things as given, as the way it's always been, in the same way that yesterday I was driving through Oxnard, and I happened to stop at this AM/PM gas station, and I looked over, and there were these two phone booths. They didn't have like the phone part. They were just there, and I thought, in a couple of years, those things are going to be worth a whole lot of money as museum pieces, And there are children today that will never have used one, Yeah. So anyway, where we're going, where this is going, is I can't begin to. I wouldn't even try to pretend that I know where it's going entirely, but what I've seen, what I've been shown, especially through my meditations and intuitions, I get these insights. That's why I in some ways I call myself. You may have seen me list myself as kind of a seer. I get these sudden insights where I literally I'm not here. I just see images and moving pictures and I feel the energy potential of it all. I see and feel that I'm being shown something, and I know that these are potential realities, and I know from my metaphysical studies that every possible reality exists in the mind of the source of infinite consciousness, and that we, as incarnate beings, are choosing what realities we wish to experience for whatever reason.